Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs, the podcast for burned out, career-minded moms who are ready to stop pretending everything's fine and feel like themselves again. I'm your host, Christy Amir, burnout coach for moms, licensed therapist, and mom of two. And I'm here to help you reclaim your energy, your identity, and your peace of mind. Whether you're lying awake thinking about the 87 things you didn't get done, or silently resenting the people you love most, this is your space to feel seen, supported, and not so alone. So grab your coffee, hot, cold, or day old, and let's get into it. Hey everybody, it's Christy. Welcome to Overcaffeinated and Out of Effs. In today's episode, I'd like to welcome our guest, Michelle Kivisto. Michelle is a marketing specialist, wife, and mother of two. After 6 successful years in sales management, followed by 10 years as a stay-at-home mom, she re-entered the workforce and rediscovered her own identity along the way. Through improv and memoir writing, Michelle found creative outlets that helped her reconnect with herself and build community beyond motherhood. She performed for several years with the all-women's improv group Susan B. Anything and continues to write regularly. So I've invited Michelle here today to talk about, she's going to share a little bit about her personal story, specifically around her decision to step back from her career for a while after becoming a mom, how she felt, and then how she felt like she lost herself a bit in motherhood. She's going to talk a little bit about, how she needed to find something that was just for her, and then the steps that she took to reclaim her identity outside of her role as a mom. So, Michelle, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, do you mind? Can we start off just maybe by you telling us a little bit, about yourself and your family? You mentioned that you used to work as a sales manager for 6 years before becoming a stay-at-home mom. So, also maybe just tell us a little bit about what life was like for you before you made that decision to become a stay-at-home mom.
Sure. So, when I started off work as a sales manager, I was newly engaged, and my husband to be, and I were busy planning a wedding, getting our apartment ready, and then after our wedding, getting a house ready, and all the things that come along with that. So I was, planning trips with my husband, and doing all the things that newlyweds do, but also kind of uh, finding myself having a lot of free time. It was
Okay.
wonderful. It was really great, but having it was in a sales manager in retail. So retail work is unpredictable. Your schedule is kind of all over the place, especially around the holidays. It would get really crazy. And, you're working night shifts, mid shifts, day shifts, and, not having a lot of time off together, like traditional weekends and things like that. So my husband and I would kind of, carve out time to go on dates and, you know, um, plan trips when I did get time off, which was really, really nice. And then we had a family friend visit with her son, and she had another one on the way. And she was kind of like, okay, Michelle, when's it your turn? And my husband and I just had so much fun with her and her family that weekend that it started to, start the conversation. Not that I hadn't heard it already from my mom, especially, when am I getting grandkids? Um, but it was a time when we had both finally decided, now's the time to start. And being a sales manager, being pregnant as a sales manager was really hard.
I
Uh,
imagine, yeah.
on my feet, on the floor, but I also had morning sickness all the
Mm,
time. Luckily, work was very forgiving about that. I could go off the sales floor if I needed to, grab a snack if I needed to, or, just kind of like sit down when I needed
mhm.
to, like in the shoe
Yeah.
department and just kind of take a seat, pretend to be a customer for a couple of minutes. Um, but then we decided that we had the resources available to let me take a step back from that and be a stay-at-home mom, which is a conversation we had before getting pregnant. But um, once that was in place then a couple months before I gave birth. I stopped working and was able to stay at home for the next 10 years.
Wow. Well, and so I'm wondering, so you talked about how you and your husband started having those conversations, about you being a stay-at-home mom. You said you'd had those conversations a little bit before that. Was that sort of always how you imagined things? Did you always want to be a stay-at-home mom? And I'm curious, like, what did you imagine life as a stay-at-home mom would look like for you?
So when I was younger, probably about 10 or 11, I made the declaration to my mom, I'm going to be a fun aunt. I'm not going to have
Mm.
my own kids. I had really good examples of fun aunts, and I was just like, "Oh, that's exactly what I wanna be." I wanna, be able to do my own thing, but also, be in these children's lives and help shape them in good ways and, do all the things and then be able to retreat and go home after and get my sleep in and
Mhm.
get my naps in and, not be overstimulated by noise or, be responsible for meals and, all the things that go along with parenting. Um
Mhm.
it really wasn't until I was married and literally had that friend come and visit that it literally just planted the seed, kind of like, "Do I even
Okay.
want this? What would this look like?" So that was in my early 30s that happened, and it
So
was
so
kind of
it
revelatory.
sounds like it wasn't even. Well, it sounds like, it wasn't, kids at all, like kids of your own, right? You picture yourself as being the aunt, but having your own kids, it sounds like that was something that really you started to think about later. So that wasn't part of your initial plan when you originally were working. That sort of came later, when you had that visit, when you had that experience. So then, what did you imagine that would be like for you once you started to think in that way?
Yeah, so when I was younger, I would babysit a lot. Like, I was the go-to babysitter. I have 3 younger sisters, and I would watch them a lot, but we also had a lot of, family friends and relatives. I had a lot of cousins, and I was always surrounded by kids, so I always felt like, I know what this is about. I know what this life is, and kinda like, I don't want that for myself. God bless everyone else who has kids, but not for me, and
Mhm.
I kind of imagined when I finally made that transition into wanting to be a mom, like, okay, this is gonna be like a really long babysitting job with no break. The parents aren't coming home. I'm not gonna get to leave with some cash in hand and be able to go and spend it at the mall the next day. This is gonna be, a lifelong thing. And so I gave myself the time to kind of wrap my head around that. But of course, it was still completely different than I thought it would
Yeah,
be.
of course, I imagine. So when you say okay, so it was very different than what you imagined it would like. So you were thinking about it in terms of like this really long babysitting job, but you had also talked, a little bit at the beginning about how you felt like you eventually ended up sort of losing your identity, losing yourself, in that motherhood role. Was that something I imagine that might have been a bit of a surprise, right? So how were you sort of imagining motherhood was going to become a part of your identity, which it did, but also it sounds like in other ways, there were some surprises for you too.
Yeah, the way that I imagined it would be like sunshine, flowers, absolute fulfillment, kind of
Mhm.
like my bucket is absolutely full. This is everything that it could be, and this is fantastic. Unfortunately, I had some pregnancy complications, morning sickness all the time. With my first, I had preeclampsia right at the very end, and I had to be induced. And that caused some mental trauma, I would say, because it really wasn't the birth I was expecting. I was just like, okay, I'm going to go in, I'm going to get the epidural, I'm going to come out with a baby a few days later. Things are great. In the hospital, they were like, the baby has some jaundice, has to go under the lights. Breastfeeding was a challenge. And I really didn't consider formula feeding at all. And it, I think I had some, is it mastitis?
Okay,
Um,
yeah. Mhm.
but didn't seek help for it because I didn't know what it was really. And it was just kind of like, okay, I've got this village, I've got the support team, but I wasn't asking for help. I wasn't
Mhm.
going out and seeking help for myself because I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
So, in that way, it was very different than how I imagined it. Because before being a sales manager, I'm kind of like, I know what I'm doing. I'm active. I can coach my team. I can get the sales. I can, set the floor. I can get the merchandise out. Boom, 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 boom. I know what to do. And all of a sudden, it was just like, this is all unscripted and there's no
Mhm.
manual. And I had no idea what to do next.
So it sounds like the realities of day-to-day life ended up being different than what you expected. You had your ideas, which we all do, and to your point, like, we don't know what we don't know, and so it sounds like there were some surprises for you. Um, I'm curious, so in terms of taking that step back, going from, working this job, now you're a stay-at-home mom, and you are focusing on a very different part of your identity. What was that experience like for you emotionally?
Emotionally, I kind of felt adrift. Not really tethered to anything. I had my kids and, that was kind of like one foot in front of the other, make the food, draw the bath, read the stories, cuddle, nap time, get one to preschool, get the other, down for a nap and time to pick the other one up from school again. And then Tim comes home and we make dinner and then it was the witching hour which threw me
Mhm.
for a surprise.
Oh,
And
yeah.
then it's potty training and it's all these things. It's literally just one foot in front of the other, it felt like. And it didn't really feel like there was a lot of headspace for how does Michelle feel? What's going on inside
Mhm.
my head today? What could I be doing better for myself?
Mhm. Yeah, no, the baby years, the infant stages are really they're all just challenging in different ways, right? Every single stage has its challenges, but those infant years can really, really be tough. Especially because it's a huge adjustment. Um, what about in terms of being a stay-at-home mom in particular? Like, what were some of the biggest challenges for you around that?
How to frame my time.
Okay.
I kind of figured out early on routine was best. Figuring out set times to feed the kids. Times that I'm like, okay, at least one day this week, I need to get out of my house. Even
Mhm.
if the kids, struggle and don't want to get in their car seats and don't want to get, coats on, I need to get out of the house. I need to get out of
Mhm.
these four walls. Um, Reaching out to friends when I could just to talk on the phone, just to kind of talk to other adults. Um, was really, really good for me. Being able to just kind of sit with a cup of hot coffee some days, was just
Mhm.
the best thing that I could do for myself. And made sure I would take a shower. Like, it's just really simple things sometimes.
Well, yeah, and I think, being a mom has its challenges regardless of what your specific um work life balance kind of looks like, what your home and work life looks like. It's going to be challenging for everybody, but those challenges are going to be different, right? And so for moms who maybe work outside of the home, that brings up about like a lot of stress and challenges. But one of the benefits that a lot of people talk about is being able to have that break, have some space from home, from kids, because as much as we love our kids, having them around us 24 hours away, 24 hours a day with no break is a lot, And so as a stay-at-home mom, you weren't getting those breaks throughout the day in the same kind of way. And so, when you talk about like needing to get out of the house, needing to, talk to your friends and things like that, it sounds like you had to be very intentional about that to make sure that you were kind of getting some space. And even in those situations, it sounds like you were still bringing the kids with you. So maybe not having that separation. Did you find that you ever really got any time for yourself aside from the kids?
Great question. It was something that I would definitely have to put on the calendar and
Okay.
schedule, 'cause it's not something that I would always think about. I always felt tethered to them,
Yeah.
kind of like my time away from them felt like, "What's going on right now? What are they doing?" Not that my husband was a completely capable parent and very hands-on and, knew how to change the diapers and make the food and, put them down for naps, but it still felt like a part of, like my arm is, muscle memory missing my kid, on my hip right
Mhm.
now. But I
Mhm.
would still trying to make time for, book clubs with my friends once a month or just going out to get something to eat with somebody. Um, but it was always like, okay, time to get home, time to get
Yeah.
back. It was never really like my mind was free to go without responsibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So when did you first start to realize that you were starting to lose a sense of yourself in motherhood?
So I started to get really jealous of my husband's commute to work.
Mm,
I
mhm.
got really jealous of the time that he took in the morning while the kids were sleeping to shower and get ready, because there was
Mhm.
another adult in the house that was responsible if the kids got up and they started, you know, um, to stir, that someone else could take care of their needs. And when I was in the house alone, it was just me. And so I'd literally, put the kids in the carrier and put them into the shower room with me so I could hear them, or wait to take a shower at night after they went to bed and then go to head soaking wet hair, which wasn't ideal. Um, I just realized that I really needed to carve out time for myself. But it also, that wasn't necessarily a meal with someone or a book club or just time for myself with my own
Mhm.
thoughts and my own feelings.
Mhm. Well, and then, yeah, having that time, to yourself, but then also it sounds like there was really a desire to explore other passions, other interests. You eventually moved into, you talk about improv and memoir writing, you were getting into that. What inspired you to sort of explore some of those things?
So when my youngest was 2 years old, she's 11 now, I got an email from the YMCA, and it said, we had our kids in swim lessons at the time, and it was an email that said, "Do you know that you have other, amenities available to you? We offer free writing classes at our downtown writer center. Would you like to sign up for one?" And I looked at the class listing, and one of them was improv comedy writing. I'm like,
Mhm.
"Oh my gosh." I grew up watching so many comedy movies with my dad, Airplane, Hot Shots, and, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, and I'm kind of
Mhm.
like, "Oh, I would really love to try taking this class." It was once a week from 6 to 9 at night, and it was right in the middle of, our youngest, bedtime, like, putting her down for bed. But
That's
my
hard.
husband was like, "We're gonna make it work. If this is something you wanna do, we're gonna make it work." And he would drop me off and then come and pick me up at 9 o'clock, and the kids would be kind of climbing the walls of the car
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
they were exhausted and tired, but I would just excitedly like, Guess what we did in class tonight? And I came up with this thing, and I came up with that thing, and the teacher really liked it, and the students really reacted, and it was just, like, me coming alive again."
Mhm.
Kind of like in this new way that I hadn't experienced in a really long time. It's like coming back
Mhm.
from a great night out with friends and being like, "Oh my gosh, I talked to this person, and then I danced to this song." And then, it was just kind of like that kind of thrill, that kind of
Mhm.
energy that I
Mhm.
just was like, I need this more."
Well, and one thing that you mentioned that I just sort of wanted to point out, is this idea that the YMCA reached out to you, right? And they offered, they told you about these classes. And I think that that's something that's just so important to remember that I just want to mention is that, I think a lot of moms are struggling with different kinds of things and they don't always know where to go for help and support. And there really are a lot of resources available. There are a lot of things out there, within the community, let's say. Obviously everybody's community is going to look a little bit different, but I just want to sort of point that out so that people, just as a reminder, to really kind of ask some of those questions and to explore what might be available in the area, just because sometimes there are things out there that we're not even aware of that can be incredibly helpful. But coming back to what you were talking about a minute ago, you were talking about, you had said that like the class was right in the middle of bedtime, 6 to 9. It's hard enough for a lot of moms to step away, and especially in a time when there's like so much going on. And I know a lot of moms really sort of struggle with that idea. And even if they know that it's okay, emotionally, it can still be a real difficult step to take. So I'm curious, like, how is that for you? Your husband said, if it's important, we'll make it work. How is that for you actually getting yourself to take that step, leave the house, go to the class, the first time, knowing that it was during bedtime and you were taking time to do something for yourself?
It was a real emotional buildup for me, kind of like, "This
Mhm.
is okay. They're not gonna die," like, that's the
Mhm.
fear of when your kids are younger, like, every wrong move means that they are going to be taken away from you in this mortal way, and it's kinda
Mhm.
like, "No, it's gonna disrupt bedtime for a night, and
Mhm.
I'm not working, so if they need the extra sleep in the morning or they're cranky the next day, I'll be there to deal with it, like,
Mhm.
it's not like it's going to affect us in this hugely detrimental way, is what I was hoping going into it.
Yeah.
And before, that would have definitely held me back thinking, like, "This is too much. My kids can't take this. They can't react to this in a good way. This is going to cause huge ripples and shockwaves in our little ecosystem in our family." But having my husband's support, being able to drop me off, I think really helped because it meant, like, I couldn't doubt myself for the half-hour drive there,
Mhm.
and I couldn't just turn around and be like, "Nope, not tonight. I'm just gonna go back. It's okay."
Mhm.
I think it was really, really great knowing, like, "Oh, my kids are here when I get out. I get to see them. Everything's okay. Everything's alright." Um, no one dislikes mommy because
Mhm.
of her leaving for the past 3 hours.
Mhm.
Everything's alright.
Mhm. I love that you said that too, right? Nobody dislikes mommy, because I feel like that's another thing that a lot of people struggle with. Not necessarily that they're afraid that their kids aren't going to like them, but for a lot of moms, there is this concern around, what is this doing for our relationship? If I take time to myself, whereas maybe they believe they should be spending that time with their kids, and that can be a real concern for a lot of people. And I love that you said, there was no dislike for mommy, right? I was able to go do the thing. I was able to do my class, come out, my kids were still there, and it sounds like everything was good. Everything was okay. Did you find that those emotional challenges became easier for you as time went on and as you went to the class more regularly?
So, yeah, the class was, I think, 6 to 8 weeks, so that class
Mhm.
went fantastic. I was like, "Okay, I'm gonna do this again," right? First time, charm. Second time, even easier. It was a morning class, and it was in memoir writing, specifically memoir for moms.
Mhm.
And at the culmination of the class, you were to submit a story to read out loud at a, festival in Rochester for, Listen to Your Mother is what it was
Mhm.
called, and it was, people getting up on stage and reading stories about motherhood or moms or the relationships, and I was like, "Oh, this is right up my alley. Yeah, this is gonna be great. I love this."
Mhm.
And the teacher was really dynamic, and it was wonderful, but the time shift and the fact that my oldest was at preschool, my youngest was gonna be with me, my husband was at work, so the dynamics changed. It was me in the car driving my daughter across town to meet up with my mom who was gonna take her and watch her while I was at class. She fought me every single week in the car,
Oh, no.
didn't want to put on her
Mhm.
coat, didn't wanna get in the car seat, didn't wanna travel in the car, didn't it was a real struggle that really, really tested me and tested my patience and tested how much do I really wanna do this? Is this detrimental to her? Is this doing terrible things for her psyche? But I also knew I also needed this, you know?
Mhm.
And that was me kind of being selfish. But at the same time, I was kind of like, all right, what's the takeaway is that my child is getting time with her grandma and her grandpa.
Mhm.
And I'm doing something that gets me out of the house. It's once a week. It's only for a
Mhm.
couple hours and it's only for a few weeks at a time. And then, this is going to go on from there. We'll see what happens next.
Well, and I would also challenge, you said right just now that, you were doing something selfish. And I would challenge, and I don't think that's selfish, right? You were doing something for yourself, which not only are you allowed to do, it's okay for you to do that, but we need to do things for ourselves, and then not only is that important, you know, because it's a way of taking care of ourselves, but it also does. It benefits the kids, it benefits our partners, it benefits the other people in our lives, when we take those kinds of steps. And you've even mentioned before that these hobbies that they make you a better mom and a better partner, right? So just now you were talking about how maybe you were having a hard time staying patient. But it also sounds like by doing this class, by doing these classes, you actually felt like you were able to show up in a way that felt better for you, for them as well. And I'm wondering if you can say more about that.
Yeah, thank you for what you said about the selfish remark because in my head, I felt like I was, definitely justified in doing it. But from the outside, what does this look like? So
Mhm.
it feels so good to have that validation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Um, as far as how it affects my, I'm sorry, you said, how does it affect my relationship with?
Well, yeah, I'm curious how these hobbies have helped make you a better mom and a better partner.
Yes. So being able to speak directly to my experiences, being able to say the hard things out loud in class with other people is really, really uplifting. It can be really difficult and emotional. And saying the things that, oh my gosh, people are going to judge me and think I'm terrible for saying some of this stuff. But then people are like, oh yeah, I went through that too. This is how I handled it. You're handling it beautifully. What are you talking about?
Mhm.
Or people are just like, "Oh my gosh, the way that you just said that, you have a real talent for writing. This is fantastic. You should keep going with this." Or, it was always coming from a place of encouragement. People were really, really um, kind with their words. Knowing, I think that I kind of felt fragile and vulnerable. Um, in terms of being a
Mhm.
parent, I kinda realized, like, my kids are also, very vulnerable, and the way that I kind of wrote about being a mother, but also being a daughter, um, made me realize that I wanna be the kind of parent that would take care of little Michelle. One of the other students in
Mhm.
classes talked about taking care of big me and taking care of little me. And I want big me to take care of little me. And what would that look like? And that always kind of stuck in my head. So to talk to my kids, I'm just like, okay, instead of coming at this from a point of frustration, let me come at this from a point of curiosity. Why are you having these big feelings right now? Is there something else going on? Did something happen at school? Is it a sensory thing? Are your clothes too itchy for you right now and you need to get out of them because it feels like they're, tearing your skin off?
Mhm.
Is the temperature off? Is there, too much stimulation? Is the noise level too loud? They don't like traveling in the car because, the sound's off or the radio is turned to the wrong station or you know, it kind of made me much more aware of what my kids are susceptible to. They're not just little adults. They are
Mhm.
kids
Mhm.
learning things for the very first time, and I shouldn't
Yeah.
expect so much from them. I should just, kind of more meet them where they are.
Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely. So it sounds like it really helped you in terms of like sort of managing your expectations and then and then affecting how you approached them, how you approach these conversations, how you approach these different kinds of challenges that might have been coming up. And it sounds like all of that you feel like really tied back to your efforts to find hobbies that felt important to you and to really just do things for yourself.
Mhm. And then, with my relationship with my husband, it really helped me regain, I won't say like a better footing, but he got to drive me to Rochester to perform in person for an audition. They got my story and they were like, if you want to come and perform this on stage, let's have you come and, speak to this in front of a panel. And so he came and dropped me off and he was just so proud. He was just kind
Mhm.
of like, that's my wife going in there, speaking a story that's true for her, that she worked on and workshopped and, got really great praise for. And even though I wasn't picked to be on stage, I got really, really good feedback in the room. And they were like, it's just not quite fitting the theme of what we want for that night. But, definitely this is a great story and it really resonates. And so, having his encouragement, he can kind of see like, this is something that I really want to do. This is something I'm really excited about and um, get a lot of fulfillment from, outside of being a mom and wife and a daughter and a sister. So that's been really, really great to have his support.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's amazing. So then, okay, so after you had, spent this time as a stay-at-home mom and then you started to pursue these other interests, these other passions, and then eventually you made the decision to go back to work, right? So what eventually led to that decision and then how did that transition go for you?
Yeah, when my youngest was old enough for nursery school, my aunt actually reached out to me and said, I'm going to start a deli business. Do you want to come and help me out during the day and make sandwiches? And I was just like, what about daycare? And she goes, oh, you know what? We've got a kitchen, set her up with a little desk in the back and, signed her up for nursery school, which was literally right across the street and, was able to walk her over. I worked a few hours. As soon as my shift was over, I picked her up and went home. And that continued for a couple of years until, COVID hit. And I
Mhm.
decided, I would stay home with my kids, for that. And, it was right around the time too that I started thinking about going back to work full time. My youngest was gonna be starting kindergarten, um, and I was just kind of like, it's kinda time. And then once COVID hit, I was like, "Oh, this works out perfectly that I don't have a job now. I'm not, working from home, except to take care of my kids and
Mhm.
help them with their schoolwork." And, that became a new routine to follow is, wake up, get your assignments, get stuff done, get some free time in, get outside
Mhm.
with the dog in the backyard, and then go back inside and
Mhm.
make dinner and, plan our weekly grocery trip and things like that. So a couple of years later was when I heard from a friend that they knew of an opening for a marketing assistant. And I was like, oh, that's something I've kind of always wanted to do. I've always been really interested in marketing. It involved writing, it involved architectural engineering, construction, AEC industry. And considering my husband's also in that industry, I kind of knew some of the terms. And, we would talk about some of his projects and, how he would tackle them. And knowing some of his work colleagues, I would, kind of be involved in that world. So I interviewed, I got the job, and it was part time. I was able to work while my kids were at school, which was a dream. And
Mhm.
then recently I decided to go full time with that. So now I work full time while my kids are at school. They're 11 and 14 now. So able to drop one off at school on my way to work, which is wonderful. I get to talk to her in the mornings and have great conversations. And then they're there when I get home about an hour after they get off the bus. And it's fantastic.
Mhm. Well, one of the things that I really love, as we're having this conversation is just sort of how you allowed your journey to kind of unfold and make different decisions and adjust to different things as life moved forward, right? As life happened. So you at first were working, it was all about you and your husband, that newlywed stage. Eventually, you started to have kids, you decided to be a stay-at-home mom, then you started to pursue these interests, then you decided to come back to work, part-time. COVID, of course, messed things up for everybody, but eventually, transition into full-time work. And I think that it's so important for the moms to be hearing this because I think for a lot of moms, it can be, hard or a lot of times we don't always think about the fact that we can make changes. And I think that can feel scary for a lot of people, but also knowing that if we make a change and then life happens and something else, comes up or, something else big happens in our lives, we can make changes again, right? We can make changes that fit with what's going on in our lives, what our priorities are at that moment, what our values are, and all of that. And it does not have to stay as one set thing. So I really love how you're sort of sharing about all these experiences. So you know, what does success look like for you now? How has that really changed for you over the years as you've moved through these different stages?
Yeah, so when my kids were younger, it was all about the milestones, right? Are they
Mhm.
walking on time? Are they talking on time? Are they being potty trained on time? Are they, working with their peers? And my kids would always just go on their own timeline. And the pediatrician would just be like, well, are they meeting this? Are they doing this? Are they doing this? And they'd be meeting the minimum. But at the same time, I'm kind of like, they're on their own. They are
Mhm.
still thriving. Their growth, line is still going up. They were, particular eaters. I won't say picky. They were particular. Um,
Mhm.
but just being curious, just knowing, okay, what could be the reasons this is happening? We found out it was sensory issues and possibly AFRID going on, fear of throwing up, fear of whatever I put in my mouth is going to come back up again. So I don't want to put anything in my mouth. We found a really great feeding therapist. They got into occupational therapy and speech therapy, which is also something I went through when I was younger. Um, so that was a really interesting process to go through because it was kind of like, oh, I needed that, but my kids will never need that. They're so great. They're so wonderful. They come from, these really great parents and we're going to do the best for them and they're going to, be the best in the world. And then you start doing the comparison and seeing other kids, do so many sports and they're, learning new languages and they're, you know, thriving in different ways. And I realized that success for me is having happy kids, having
Mhm.
a happy relationship with my husband and with my family and with my in-laws and with my family, friends, and other loved ones. Um, it's just finding out what is that happiness for us and kind of like
Mhm.
trying to chase that. For my husband and kids, it's traveling. We really, really love to travel. And so we got to
Mhm.
take a couple of trips this year that just kind of, we didn't have to do a lot. It was just kind of like about us being together but also about like mom's gonna go and sit on the deck and read a book for a while the kids are, in the pool swimming with dad. And we're gonna go off and enjoy this nature hike and the kids just wanna, hang out in the souvenir shop while, we go and do that. And that's okay. I mean, they're old enough that we can do that, thank goodness. I wouldn't do that when they
Mhm.
were 2 and 4. But when
Mhm.
they were 2 and 4, we could push them in the strollers and they go where mom and dad go.
Mhm. Yeah,
So
no,
yeah,
absolutely.
so if I'm a successful parent, I think it means just having kids who treat other humans with kindness and who are aware of what their feelings are and
Mhm.
how they can affect the world, essentially.
Well, and when you talk to about, having happy kids, happy relationship, and you had talked about, the comparison trap, right? Which is something that unfortunately so many of us get caught up in, and it sounds like, when you realized, success is about having happy kids, having happy relationship. Part of that is letting go of that comparison, right? Because happiness is going to look different for everybody. Our relationships are going to look different. Our interests are going to look different. What is going to help our kids be happy, is not going to be exactly the same for every single person and every single family. So yeah, no, that's great. So now if you could go back in time and talk to the version of you who was feeling, lost in motherhood, what would you tell her?
Um, you can't exactly say it's gonna be okay because things are never truly okay. There's always gonna be some curveball coming in your direction.
Mhm.
But if I were to tell her anything, it would be speak up, ask for help, ask for help a
Mhm.
lot. If you don't find the answer from one person, keep looking for it. Ask for second opinions, third opinions. Um,
Mhm.
keep going until you find something that feels really, really right. If it means changing pediatricians, gynecologists, um, it, unfortunately, even your friend circle. If people become toxic,
Yeah.
then seek for help trying to go no or low contact with them, for your
Yeah.
own sanity. Just speak up and ask for help.
Okay. Well, and what about the listeners, right? So the people who are listening to this podcast, if you could leave them with one final message or one final piece of advice, what would it be? Would it be the same as what you just mentioned for yourself, or would there be anything else?
Um, it would kind of be like the guiding principle in memoir writing and improv, which is trust your instincts. If
Mhm.
something feels right, keep going in that direction. If
Mhm.
something feels wrong or feels off, you don't have to keep pursuing it
Mhm.
and, second guessing why you feel that way. Even if everyone else is kind of like, oh, it's fine, it's fine, it's fine, just keep doing it. If it feels wrong or off, then it's wrong or off for you.
Mhm.
And you can get yourself out of that situation or stop pursuing that. Or, even if it's a relationship, kind of take a step back and kind of listen to your instincts, listen to what your body's telling you. Because when you're on stage in improv, following your instincts means kind of subconsciously looking at clues as to what someone is saying, but also what they're doing, how they're acting, how they're performing. And when it's memoir writing or just writing in general, you usually get a prompt and you just go off in a direction and you just kind of follow wherever that writing takes you, or that memoir writing, wherever that memory is. Trust that what you're feeling is true for you, even if someone else doubts what your memory is. If it's true for you, then it's true for you. So
Mhm.
definitely trust your gut, trust your instincts. They can lead you in very good directions.
Well, and I love that you really emphasized for you, right? Because you're right. Something that feels good for one person might not feel good for somebody else. Something that doesn't feel good for one person, could for somebody else. And it's really, for you, right? And to your point, like if something does not feel good for you, you can make other decisions. You can do things differently, So I really love that you talked about that. So thank you again. I know I thanked you at the beginning, but I want to thank you again just so much for taking the time to be here. I think that this is really great, sharing your story, sharing your experiences. I know that there are a lot of moms out there who can really resonate with your story and can really benefit from hearing it just because it helps them to not feel so alone. It helps to validate their own experiences, and I just think this is really wonderful. So I very much appreciate it. And then, as always, for the moms who are listening, if you did find any of the things we talked about today to be valuable or helpful, I would just ask that you please share this podcast with other moms that might maybe could use some additional support because, as always, we are all in this together.